There is a silence deeper than any sound, a stillness that unnerves us because it threatens everything we think we know about ourselves. We live in a world constructed from illusions, illusions of control, permanence, and certainty. And yet, beneath those illusions lies a raw, unyielding truth. The self we cling to so desperately is no more than a mask, a fragile construct shaped by fear and desire. To face this truth is to confront the abyss within, and in doing so, to awaken a courage few dare to claim. What we call identity is often a carefully woven tapestry of narratives, stories we tell ourselves and others to justify our existence, to claim meaning in an indifferent cosmos. But these stories are just that, stories. They are not the substance of our being. They are shadows cast on the wall of an empty cave, flickering and insubstantial. The real self, the one we fear to meet, is not a story but a vast, silent presence, indifferent to praise or blame, unmarked by time or circumstance. Our deepest terror is not death itself, but the collapse of the narrative self, the character we've played so long and so convincingly that we mistake the mask for the face. Death strips away the script, the rehearsed lines, the roles that have defined us. It leaves only what we have never allowed ourselves to see, the luminous emptiness at the heart of being. This is why death feels like loss, like an ending, when it is in truth a return, a beginning. We are trapped by the illusion that life is something to be controlled, managed, and perfected. We chase security in possessions, status, relationships, and achievements, hoping they will shield us from the chaos within and without. Yet, the harder we clutch, the more the ground shifts beneath our feet. Life does not yield to control, it flows, unpredictable and wild, indifferent to our plans and desires. Fear arises from resistance to this flow. It is the echo of a deeper dissonance, a refusal to surrender the ego's claim to permanence. We mistake fear for reality, and in doing so, we imprison ourselves in a cage of anxiety and expectation. But fear is only a signpost, pointing toward where we have denied our own freedom. It beckons us to step beyond the known, into the mystery that lies beyond the veil of illusion. To live authentically requires a radical letting go, not of life itself, but of the self that clings to life as a possession. This is the metaphysical act of courage, to stand naked in the face of uncertainty, to embrace the paradox of existence without flinching. It is to recognize that meaning is not found in the narratives we tell, but in the conscious acceptance of the mystery itself. When we begin to relinquish our grip on identity, something remarkable happens. The world loses its tyranny. We no longer react with desperate grasping or fearful avoidance. Instead, we move with a strange grace, responding to life's rhythms with fluidity and ease. The boundaries between self and other blur, and a profound sense of unity emerges, not as an abstract idea, but as a living experience. This experience is not a final destination, but an ongoing dance, a continuous shedding and becoming. It requires vigilance and humility, for the ego is cunning and relentless. It will attempt to reclaim its throne, weaving new stories, disguising itself in subtle forms. But the awakened soul learns to recognize these tricks, to see the shadows for what they are, and to rest in the clarity of presence. Presence is the antidote to the tyranny of the mind. It is the spaciousness in which the endless chatter of doubt and fear dissolves. In presence, there is no need for defense, no impulse to escape or control. There is only the raw immediacy of being, breathing, sensing, existing in the now. And in this now, life reveals its true nature, fluid, mysterious, and endlessly alive. To cultivate presence is to practice dying while alive, to touch the edge of the unknown without losing footing. It is a paradox, a sacred tension between surrender and awakening. The more we surrender, the more fully we awaken. The more we awaken, the less we cling. This is the path of transformation, not as a distant goal, but as a daily commitment to face ourselves honestly. Suffering often becomes the catalyst for this transformation. It strips away illusions with merciless clarity, forcing us to confront the fragility of our constructions. Pain is not an enemy to be avoided, but a messenger, revealing where we have closed ourselves off from truth and love. In the crucible of suffering, the ego's defenses crumble, and the soul finds room to breathe. Yet, suffering itself is not the goal. The goal is liberation, freedom from the chains of identification with pain, fear, and loss. This freedom is not achieved through denial or repression, but through deep acceptance of all that is, including our darkest shadows. Only by embracing the totality of our experience can we glimpse the wholeness beneath fragmentation. Relationships serve as mirrors in this journey. They reflect back to us the parts of ourselves we deny or ignore. In the dance of intimacy, our masks are stripped away more quickly and painfully than anywhere else. Here, the invitation is to meet the other, and ourselves, without pretense or defense. To love and be loved is to face the raw truth of vulnerability and find strength in it. But most remain trapped in roles within relationships, parent, lover, friend, never daring to show the fragile self beneath. These roles become prisons, confining and defining us. True connection requires stepping beyond these roles into authenticity, risking rejection and loss for the sake of genuine encounter. It is a leap into the unknown, a surrender of control that can shatter the illusion of separateness. The greatest illusion is that we are separate from the world, isolated in discrete containers of selfhood. But the deeper we journey, the more this illusion unravels. We discover that we are not isolated islands, but ripples in an endless ocean. Our lives intersect and merge, influencing and being influenced in an eternal dance of becoming. This realization can dissolve loneliness and ignite compassion, the recognition of shared humanity. Compassion is not a sentimental feeling, but a profound recognition of our interconnectedness. It arises naturally when we see beyond the ego's narrow horizon and glimpse the suffering and joy of others as our own. Compassion softens the heart hardened by fear and judgment, opening a path toward healing and reconciliation with ourselves and the world. To walk this path is to embrace paradox at every turn. Life is both fragile and fierce, terrifying and beautiful, transient and eternal. The mind seeks certainty, but the soul longs for mystery. The ego demands control, but true freedom lies in surrender. The challenge is not to resolve these contradictions, but to live within them fully and fearlessly. In the final analysis, philosophy is not merely an intellectual pursuit, but a lived practice. It is the discipline of questioning, of peeling back layers of illusion to reveal the raw truth beneath. It demands courage to face uncomfortable realities, humility to accept our limitations, and openness to the vast unknown. Philosophy is the art of dying to the false self so that the true self might emerge. As you listen to these words, consider what masks you wear. What stories do you tell yourself to feel safe? What fears keep you bound to the familiar, even when it brings pain? The invitation is to look beyond the surface, to embrace uncertainty, and to find the freedom that lies in not knowing. To step into the silence where the ego falls away, and something far greater waits. This is the awakening of the soul, a journey without end, a dance of light and shadow, death and rebirth. It is not promised or guaranteed, but offered freely to those willing to face themselves honestly. To live fully is to die continuously to what we are not, so that what we truly are can be known. To live fully is to become a mystery unto ourselves and the world. And in that mystery lies everything, fear and love, loss and gain, death and life intertwined in an eternal embrace. To embrace this is to be truly alive. To move deeper into this journey is to recognize the subtle ways the ego disguises itself, always crafting new narratives to avoid the uncomfortable truth of impermanence. These disguises come cloaked in identity, titles, beliefs, achievements, but beneath them lies the same fragile core that trembles at the thought of dissolution. The mind, relentless in its efforts, weaves intricate defenses, building labyrinths of rationalizations and distractions to keep the self intact, safe from the void. Yet, paradoxically, these very efforts entangle us further. The harder we cling to the notion of a permanent self, the more tightly the chains of suffering bind us. Every attachment, every resistance to change fortifies the walls of a prison we mistake for home. The irony is that freedom lies not in holding on, but in the courage to let go of identity, expectation, even the desire to understand fully. True freedom demands surrender to the unknown, an act of faith in the mystery beyond reason. This surrender is not weakness but the strongest act of rebellion against the tyranny of the ego. It is a refusal to be defined by fear, loss, or limitation. To surrender is to say yes to life in its rawest form, without conditions or guarantees. It is to embrace uncertainty as the very essence of existence, understanding that security is a myth, and that the only true refuge is within. Within this refuge lies a dimension often overlooked, the sacredness of the present moment. It is here, in the immediacy of now, that the ego loses its grip. Time, as the mind measures it, dissolves into a boundless flow where past and future collapse into an endless present. This timelessness is not an abstraction, but an experience accessible to those willing to quiet the mind and listen deeply. Listening deeply is an art lost in the noise of modern life. We speak constantly, filling silences with words to avoid facing ourselves. But silence is not emptiness, it is the fertile ground from which clarity and insight arise. In silence, the false self falls away, revealing the luminous presence that is our true nature. This presence does not strive, does not compete, it simply is. And in this simple being, all things find their meaning. The path toward this realization is often solitary, for the ego fears exposure and vulnerability. It thrives in the company of distraction and conformity, where it can blend unnoticed. Yet solitude is not loneliness, it is an opportunity to strip away layers of falsehood, to meet the self stripped bare. In solitude, the soul whispers its deepest truths, often drowned out by the cacophony of everyday life. But solitude also tests us. It forces us to confront the shadows within, the doubts, insecurities, and wounds carefully hidden from view. These shadows, when faced with courage, transform from sources of pain into gateways of wisdom. They teach us the impermanence of suffering and the resilience of the spirit. Each encounter with our darkness becomes a step toward wholeness, a movement toward integration rather than fragmentation. Integration is the key to transcending duality, the perpetual conflict between light and shadow, self and other, life and death. It is the acknowledgement that these opposites are not enemies but complementary aspects of a single reality. To integrate is to embrace complexity without simplification, to hold paradox without needing resolution. This maturity brings a profound peace that surpasses intellectual understanding. Peace, however, is not a static state, but a dynamic process. It arises from constant engagement with the flow of life, an ongoing dance between acceptance and transformation. To seek peace is not to escape the world, but to meet it fully, with open eyes and an open heart. It requires strength to face suffering without fleeing and compassion to embrace others without judgment. Compassion flows naturally from this openness. When we see ourselves clearly, flaws and all, we cease to judge harshly. We recognize that others too are caught in the same web of fear and longing, struggling beneath the weight of their own stories. This recognition dissolves barriers and fosters connection, reminding us that at our core, we share a common vulnerability. But compassion is not an invitation to complacency. It demands action informed by wisdom and courage. True compassion challenges injustice, confronts cruelty, and dares to dream of a world where suffering is alleviated. It calls us to act from a place of deep understanding rather than reactionary impulse, to become agents of change grounded in presence. Change itself is a paradox. We long for it yet fear its uncertainty. We seek growth but resist the discomfort it brings. Yet growth requires breaking free from old patterns, relinquishing worn identities, and stepping into uncharted territory. It is a process of continual dying and rebirth, a cycle as ancient as life itself. This cyclical nature of existence can be observed in the rhythms of nature, the seasons that ebb and flow, the day giving way to night, the tides rising and falling. Nature teaches us that all things are transient, that endings are beginnings, and that renewal follows decay. When we align ourselves with these rhythms, we cultivate resilience and grace. Resilience is not mere endurance, but a profound adaptability, a willingness to bend without breaking. It emerges from an understanding that suffering is not an aberration, but an integral part of life. Resilience embraces suffering as a teacher, using it to deepen insight and expand capacity for love. Love, in this context, transcends romantic idealism. It is a force of profound transformation, the ground from which healing and wholeness arise. Love dissolves barriers, bridges divides, and reveals the unity underlying diversity. It is the language of the soul, spoken not in words, but in presence, compassion, and acceptance. Presence, compassion, and love together form the foundation of an authentic life. They invite us to step beyond survival and into true living. They call us to awaken from the trance of identification with pain and fear, to embrace the fullness of existence with courage and joy. Joy, paradoxically, often emerges not from external circumstances, but from an inner freedom, a freedom born of acceptance and surrender. It is a radiant energy that flows from the soul when it is no longer entangled in illusion. Joy is not fleeting happiness, but a deep, abiding contentment rooted in truth. Truth, however, is elusive. It cannot be grasped as a fixed concept or a final answer. It is a living presence that reveals itself differently at every stage of the journey. To seek truth is to embark on a lifelong quest marked by curiosity, humility, and openness. It is to acknowledge the limits of knowledge and to embrace mystery. Mystery is the space where life unfolds beyond comprehension. It invites wonder and awe, reminding us that existence is far greater than our minds can fathom. To live with mystery is to dance with uncertainty, to trust in the unseen forces that guide us. Trust itself is a radical act in a world that often seems chaotic and unpredictable. It is the willingness to lean into life without guarantees, to open the heart despite fear. Trust arises from experience, from moments when surrender led not to destruction, but to expansion. Expansion is the hallmark of spiritual growth. It is the broadening of awareness, the deepening of understanding, and the widening of compassion. Expansion dissolves narrow identities and opens us to the vastness within and around us. Within this vastness, the concept of self transforms. It shifts from a fixed entity to a fluid process, an ever-changing expression of consciousness. This shift is not an erasure of individuality, but a liberation from the confines of egoic limitation. Liberation is the ultimate aim of the philosophical journey, the freedom to live authentically, without illusion or fear. It is the dawn after a long night of confusion, the emergence of clarity from chaos. Liberation is not a destination, but a way of being, a continuous practice of presence, courage, and love. As we conclude this reflection, remember that this journey is yours alone and yet shared by all who seek truth. It is a path marked by challenge and grace, by loss and discovery, by death and life intertwined. To walk it fully is to embrace the mystery and become the mystery. And in doing so, you awaken to the profound truth that you are not separate from the cosmos but a vital expression of its infinite dance. You are both the question and the answer, the seeker and the sought, the flame and the light. Walk this path with courage, walk it with love, and walk it with the deep knowing that the journey itself is the destination.